the Dorchester Hotel, London, March 4th, 1961. Elizabeth Taylor couldn't breathe. She'd been fighting a cold for weeks. Nothing serious, she thought, just the London weather, the endless rain, the stress of filming the most expensive movie ever made. But now, lying in her hotel bed, she realized something was terribly wrong. Her lungs were filling with fluid. Every breath was a struggle. Every heartbeat felt like her last. Her doctor was called. He took one look at her and went pale. Get an ambulance. Now! Elizabeth Taylor, the most beautiful woman in the world, the highest paid actress in history, was dying. And she knew it. Here's what you have to understand about Elizabeth Taylor in 1961. She was at the absolute peak of her fame. 2 Oscars, the face that launched 1,000 magazine covers, violet eyes that had captivated the world since she was a child. And she just signed the biggest contract in Hollywood history, $1 million to play Cleopatra. No actress had ever been paid that much. It made headlines around the world. But the production was a disaster from day one. They'd started filming in London in September 1960. Wrong choice. London was cold, rainy, miserable. The massive outdoor sets were constantly flooded. And Elizabeth, wearing gossamer-thin costumes designed for Egyptian heat, was exposed to the brutal British winter. The budget was spiraling out of control. Every day of delay cost the studio tens of thousands of dollars. And Elizabeth kept getting sick. First it was a cold, then the flu, then bronchitis, then something worse. By early March, she had pneumonia, but the studio needed her. They were hemorrhaging money every day she wasn't on set. So Elizabeth kept working, kept pushing through, until her body gave out. The ambulance rushed her to the London clinic. Doctors examined her. What they found terrified them. Her lungs were shutting down. She had acute staphylococcal pneumonia, one of the most dangerous forms. Her fever was 105 degrees. Her oxygen levels were plummeting. They put her on oxygen, massive doses of antibiotics, everything they had. But Elizabeth kept getting worse. March 4th, late evening, Elizabeth stopped breathing. Her heart stopped. The medical team rushed in, tried to revive her. Manual resuscitation, chest compressions, adrenaline directly into her heart. Nothing. The monitors flatlined. For 4 minutes, Elizabeth Taylor was clinically dead. The doctors made a desperate decision. If they couldn't get air into her lungs through her mouth and nose, they'd have to cut a hole in her throat. A tracheotomy. Emergency surgery. Right there in the hospital room. Dr. Carl Goldman grabbed a scalpel. No time for an operating room. No time for proper anesthesia. He cut into Elizabeth's throat, through skin, through tissue, searching for her windpipe. He found her windpipe, inserted a tube. Air rushed into her lungs. Her heart started beating again. Elizabeth Taylor came back from the dead. When she woke up, she couldn't speak. There was a tube in her throat, bandages around her neck, pain everywhere. The doctors told her how close she'd come. For minutes without oxygen, for minutes of her heart not beating, for minutes where they thought they'd lost her. Elizabeth looked in the mirror, saw the hole in her throat, the scar that would never completely fade. She'd survived. But at what cost? The news went global. Elizabeth Taylor near death. Liz Taylor fights for life. World praise for Elizabeth. The headlines were everywhere. Radio stations interrupted programming. Newspapers printed special editions. Fans gathered outside the London clinic, holding vigil. 20th Century Fox panicked. They'd invested millions in Cleopatra. If Elizabeth died, the entire production was finished. Studio executives called the hospital constantly. Even as Elizabeth fought for her life, they were calculating costs. But Elizabeth didn't die. She fought, recovered, with the same fierce determination that had gotten her through a childhood in Hollywood. 6 weeks later, against all medical advice, she went back to work. But not in London. They'd scrapped everything filmed there. Too expensive, too cursed. Millions of dollars worth of footage thrown away. They moved production to Rome. Started over. With new director Joseph L. Mankiewicz. A new vision. and a new co-star named Richard Burton. The affair that followed became the scandal of the century. Elizabeth was married to Eddie Fisher. Burton was married to Sybil Burton. But from the moment they started filming together, the chemistry was undeniable. The press went insane. The Vatican condemned them. Elizabeth received death threats, but she didn't care. She died and come back. What was scandal compared to that? Cleopatra finally premiered in 1963, 2 years late, for times over budget at $44 million. The most expensive film ever made. It nearly bankrupted 20th Century Fox. But Elizabeth survived it all. The near death, the scandal, the chaos. She always survived. Here's what most people don't know. Elizabeth kept that scar on her throat for the rest of her life. A thin white line where they cut her open to save her. She hid it with jewelry, elaborate necklaces, scarves, makeup, but it was always there. A reminder that she'd been dead and come back. Years later, she'd joke about it. I've been married 8 times and died once. I'm not sure which was worse. But those who knew her said she was never quite the same after London. That something fundamental changed, and those for minutes her heart stopped beating. She became braver, more reckless, more willing to defy expectations, more willing to live exactly as she wanted. Because when you've been dead, what's left to fear? When you think of Elizabeth Taylor today, you think of the beauty, the diamonds, the marriages, the drama. But remember March 1961. Remember a woman lying in a London hospital, clinically dead, while a doctor cut into her throat to save her life. Remember that behind all the glamour was a fighter, a survivor, a woman who literally came back from death and went right back to work. Was it worth it? Cleopatra nearly destroyed everyone involved. But Elizabeth didn't care about worth it. She cared about finishing what she started. Behind the icon was a scar. Behind the beauty was death. Behind Cleopatra was 4 minutes that changed everything. That is Elizabeth Taylor. Not just the actress, not just the legend, but the woman who died and refused to stay dead, who came back stronger, who wore her survival like armor and her scars like jewelry. Her legacy isn't just the films or the fame. It's the reminder that you can survive anything. That death isn't the end if you refuse to accept it. That sometimes the most beautiful things hide the deepest scars. And sometimes coming back from the dead is just the beginning of the story.